I think it's safe to say that one of the worst nightmares for players and DMs is a total party kill. As DMs, we work so hard building encounters that will challenge our party, but are not too challenging to TPK them. Yet, it still happens. D&D is a game built on a foundation of randomness, and sometimes a single die roll can change everything. But fear not, there are tools that DMs can implement to prevent TPKs. I have used all of these tips personally to help stop disastrous situations from turning into TPKs in the past, so I hope they'll help you as well. My first tip is to take them alive. This tip is quite simple. Write into your encounters reasons why enemies would take characters alive. The reasons for this are endless. Maybe the heroes have a piece of information that a group of enemies need, or they're being held alive to be eaten for later. Whatever the case, a majority of enemies do have pretty good reasons for taking characters alive and not leaving them for dead. Remember these two factors when implementing this tip. Make sure you signal towards the beginning of combat or when you know a TPK is possible that these creatures are trying to take the party alive. If the entire party falls unconscious and then you quickly say that they wake up all alive and chained, that will feel cheap. Like the DM is making sure the party does not completely lose or that this idea was thought up last minute. Now, it's completely okay if that is what you're doing, but you can't let the party know that. Secondly, there are some enemies or situations where this is not appropriate. If it's a boss battle and the boss has made it clear that they want the party dead, you cannot use this tactic. It does not make any sense. This goes doubly so if the boss would have been better off killing the party than taking them prisoner. Don't use this tip to make your villains appear dumb. You gotta have a good reason for them capturing the party. Alright, tip 2, an unlocked power. Imagine anytime you've ever seen a superhero or fantasy protagonist dig deep to unlock a new power in order to defeat the villain of the week. It's standard fantasy fare. You can do the same in Dungeons & Dragons. I recommend creating a power-up for each player character. If the time is right, you can have a character unlock this power in a time of great need or personal growth. With this boost in power, the battle can swing in the favor of the party. However, this strategy is a double-edged sword. You cannot use this all the time, and it must be used very carefully, else the party will think they're invincible or they can simply rely on this power to get out of any situation. There are a few things I recommend doing if you're going to use this power-up tactic. Firstly, and I would argue this is probably most important, foreshadow the power. There should be clues to show that the character might have this power before they actually use it for the first time. If there is a cleric, it might be a hint from a god. Or if the character is a fighter, maybe on a natural 20, they display a little bit of this power. The fighter doesn't know how they use this extra power, but they know that it's there in some form or some capacity. Furthermore, you need to give this power a cost. A paladin might lose access to some of their magic or smites for a while. I once had a ranger draw their power from their sentient weapon. The cost was that the weapon went dormant and lost much of its power for a few sessions. Heck, the cost can even be material. Maybe a player has to consume, I don't know, dragon's blood in order to access the power. Essentially, this point is about the power needing a limiter. If the player knows that this power has a high cost and should only ever be attempted in the most dire of circumstances, it keeps everything in balance within your game. And lastly, know exactly where the power comes from and how it is used. Defining the power scope helps to prevent accidental power creep. With all these things in mind, your power-ups should be memorable TPK saving systems. Hey, very quickly, if you're really liking this video and the channel in general, consider subscribing. Most of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, and the more subscribers this channel gets, the more the videos will spread to the greater YouTube community. Any support is appreciated. Alright, back to the main video, and tip 3, an NPC savior arrives. In Lord of the Rings, at Helm's Deep, the party is essentially about to TPK. They have expended all their options and there's nowhere left to run, and then Gandalf arrives with aid and saves the day. This is an example of an NPC savior. If the party is about to TPK, they can show up to help. That's a very important word here, help. The arrival of an NPC shouldn't completely save the party. The exception to that is if the help was foreshadowed or expected. Let's rewind back to Lord of the Rings. Gandalf says, "Look to my coming at first light on the 5th day." This is a foreshadowing of the event. However, during moments of high stakes action or near TPKs, most players will forget about your foreshadowing, especially if you foreshadow 2 or 3 sessions before. It's a good way to hide that you're actually foreshadowing and that something will be happening soon. Now, this foreshadowing does not mean railroading. It can be as simple as an NPC saying that they are going to help or that they've been working on something new. You lay the foundation and then unleash the NPC in accordance with what the party actually does. If they never need the NPC, you don't need them to do anything. plain and simple. Or if you don't want all that prep to go to waste, maybe the NPC goes off to solve another problem and helps the party that way. In doing this method, the NPC still has a cool moment, but also doesn't come in and steal the party's thunder when they're already doing something heroic. However, usually in a TPK situation, I like to use an NPC to provide a way of escape. They can create just enough of an opening that everyone's able to get away or escape the problem. The problem still remains, but it's been pushed off. Now the party can regroup, perhaps level up once or twice, and then go back and deal with the problem. But the NPC hasn't solved everything. Again, difference between helping and saving. I'd note that you should never build an encounter centering around an NPC showing up. This can make the party feel like they've lost agency. However, if the party has gotten themselves into hot water and then the NPC arrives, the aid is usually met with gratitude. At least if the NPC arrival is rare. Using too many NPC helpers feels like it is the NPCs who are the heroes and not the party. Like with any of these tips, use the NPC helper sparingly and only when absolutely necessary. And finally, tip 4, alert the players to danger. Sometimes, the best way to avoid a TPK is to straight up tell the players that they are in a lot of danger. When you, as the DM, tell the players they should be worried, players tend to listen and take the situation more seriously. If a party is going into an encounter with a high potential of TPKing, one where perhaps tips 1 to 3 don't apply, then telling your players will put them in a better mindset to take on this encounter. Players do not have access to all the information you do. They might look at an encounter as not difficult and hold back until it's too late. By letting them know ahead of time that there is danger, they can make an informed choice about how and whether to fight. Sometimes players walk themselves into unwinnable encounters, and in those situations, if they knew more about what they were getting into, they would choose to run away. Heck, their characters would choose to run away. Now, is this metagaming? Yes, I'd say so, but this is a good type of metagaming. Your players and you are playing a game. Let me repeat this, you're playing a game. You've put lots of time into characters and story and maybe even painting miniatures. All of you don't want the campaign to end or become completely different. This is a measure to help you continue the game. It is the same type of metagaming that makes a random group of characters form an adventuring party in a tavern. This is metagaming to create a game between friends and help sponsor that game. So yes, I would recommend just out of character telling players if they're going into something really dangerous that it is really dangerous. Now, if you made it this far in the video, I have a secret 5th tip, or really an anti-tip to give you. Tip 5. Fudging dice rolls, or why you shouldn't do it in a TPK situation. There's a lot I can say about fudging dice rolls, and will probably get its own video down the line. However, don't fudge dice rolls to save a TPK. Your players will notice and it will destroy the engagement in your game. If your players know that they cannot lose, then the tension is gone. Worse, this can turn even the best players into murder hobos. Without the ability to fail, who cares? I'll just murder the tavern keeper for that sword. I have nothing to fear. If I get into really big trouble, the DM will just fudge dice rolls to keep my character alive. It's a slippery slope. Never fudge during a potential TPK. Don't pull your punches. I promise players will respect your game more if it has integrity. Players who believe in your world and your rulings will come back to your table time after time. And players who don't, well, they'll move on. No D&D is better than bad D&D. I stand by that take, and if you're fudging dice rolls to prevent a TPK, many players will get upset and think of your game as bad D&D. Although, maybe you want to learn how to make encounters that are balanced so you never put yourself into this situation. If so, check out this video right here. I break down my system for building encounters. Despite what this video may suggest, I've never had a TPK result from my encounter balancing. I'd actually say that my encounters are one of the things I'm complimented about most, and this is part of the formula for making those encounters. Also, thank you for entering the dungeon.